Hello, and welcome to another one of my videos on the topic of management science, where we utilize Microsoft Excel to model and then solve simple, everyday business problems. Now, this problem can be found in Introduction to Management Science, 3rd edition by Hiller and Hiller. It is a great textbook for case studies, and I encourage you to pick it up if you can find a used copy online or at a used bookstore. You can also find my contact information at the bottom of this first slide. Feel free to visit my blog, contact me, or add me on Twitter, and the same on YouTube. Now, a few things about this problem before we actually get into the problem itself. Number one, I will be doing this problem in 2 videos. The reason being that setting up the problem is as much a learning experience as actually solving it. So we will do a background video about the problem, and then we'll do a separate video actually filling in the spreadsheet and solving it. Number 2, I will be going pretty quickly, so feel free to stop and rewind if you need to. And number 3, if you are watching this video on YouTube, please refer to the description below the video, and there you will find a link to the corresponding blog post where I have the problem written out long form, and you can download a blank copy of the Excel spreadsheet so you can follow step by step right along as we solve the problem in part 2. Now, what kind of problem do we have here? We have a major problem, is the best way I can explain it. We have a company that is in the middle of a cash crisis, and it's going to be our responsibility as managers to help them solve it. So let's go ahead and dive right in. So we have a company called Penn Interest, and they are a retail space developer. So things like shopping centers, strip malls, independently standing buildings that they lease out and things like that. But basically they develop retail space that is then leased or rented by businesses so they can set up shop there. Now, as we know, things have been pretty rough over the past 3, 4, 5 years. And this problem is actually set back in 2007. And what has happened is that Penn Interest is in the midst of a cash crunch, a cash crisis. When the economy went off the cliff, all of a sudden they had very little cash coming in and a bunch of cash going out. So what they figured out is that over the next 10 years, from about 2007 to 2017, they're going to have a real cash problem. Number one, they have lower occupancy in their properties. Many businesses went out of business or moved elsewhere. And I'm sure you've seen this. Gone by a strip mall and you see a sign in the window that says for lease. The sign's taken off the top of the building and it says for lease or for rent, because that business is gone one way or another. And when that business is gone, that means there is no cash coming in on whatever term the lease was for that space. And number 2, right before the economy collapsed, Penn Interest had made commitments to develop new malls or new strip malls or stuff like that. So here they are. They have diminished cash flow coming in because of decreased occupancy, and they have more than normal increased cash outflow because of the capital commitments they made prior to the economy falling off a cliff. So as you can imagine, they are in the middle of a cash crisis, and they have to figure out, and we're going to help them figure out how to solve it. Now, they know that in order to meet their cash flow requirements over the next 10 years, Penn Interest is going to have to take out business loans from their bank. They're going to have to take out loans from the bank to meet their cash requirements. Now, one constraint we have is that according to company policy, at the end of each year, Penn Interest cash balance must be $500,000 or greater. It cannot go below $500,000. So that is a constraint we have in the problem. And of course, Penn Interest has ongoing obligations. They have to pay their employees, they have to pay their contractors, they may have to pay their own building rent, they may have to pay lenders they already have debt with. In addition to what they have added in the capital projects, they have their ongoing day-to-day things. So they're really kind of in a bind, and we're going to help them solve this problem. Now, what we know right now is that Penn Interest has a current cash balance of $1 million right now. So we're pretending like this is the beginning of 2007. But right now, they have $1 million cash, which is great because that's well above their $500,000 minimum requirement. Penn Interest estimates that the cash flow is going to be very negative for the next 3 years. But after that, they predict that it will rebound. So the first 3 years are going to be tough. And then after those 3 years, things are going to get better. Now their banker, J.K. Moregain, has offered them 2 types of financing for this 10-year period. The first option is a 10-year loan at 7% interest with annual interest payments, and then the entire principal is repaid at the end of the term, so at the end of year 10. Now the other option is a series of 1-year loans locked in at 10%. So it's not based on whatever the prevailing interest rate is that year, whatever the Federal Reserve does. It's locked in at 10% for each 1-year loan during that 10-year period. Now you got to stop and think about this. There are pros and cons to each situation. The 10-year loan locks in a lower interest rate. So it's predictable. They know what the interest payments are going to be. They know what the principal payback will be at the end of year 10. Now, of course, things could happen here. The interest rates could stay the same over the next 10 years, which is not likely. Or prevailing interest rates could go up. And in that case, the 10-year loan looks very good because they've locked in the 7% interest when interest rates have gone up several percent. Now, of course, the opposite could happen. Interest rates could really go down, and then they're stuck with this 7% loan when prevailing interest rates may be 5% or 4.5% or something. So it's a pro and con either way. It's predictable. It's a lower interest rate for the current time that's locked in over 10 years. But there is risk, interest rate risk, on the downside. If interest rates go down, they're stuck with a higher rate. And of course, the 1-year loans are very flexible. They can be taken any year, or they can be taken in year 1, but not year 2, and then year 4, and et cetera, et cetera. So the 1-year loans, yeah, they're locked in at 10% regardless, but the company can pick and choose when they want to take the 1-year loans. So that's sort of the trade-off. Their banker has said, okay, here are your 2 options. You can select one option completely, you can select another option completely, or you can mix and match based on your needs. Now, here is Penn Interest's projected cash flow over the next 10 years. As you can see, from 2007 to 2009, things are pretty rough. We have negative net cash flows for all 3 years. In 2010, cash flow turns positive for 3 years. Then there's sort of a down year in 2013, an up year in 2014, a little dip in 2015, and then a big year in 2016. So you can see the first 3 years are a little bit rough, and then after that, things, overall turn pretty positive. So here's what we know now. We've just seen the cash flow on the chart, so we know that. We know that the company must maintain a minimum cash balance at the end of each year of $500,000. We also know that their current cash balance is $1 million. Now, let's just pause here for a second. If we go back to the chart, we can see that in the first year, in 2007, they're projecting a net cash outflow of $8 million. But their current cash balance is only $1 million. So they're already in a hole for a tremendous amount of money. So we can see that the problem is very acute. It's right now upon us. Now, we also know that the long-term interest rate offered is 7%. The short-term interest rate offered is 10%. And again, that's 10% over the 10-year period, regardless of whatever interest rates are at that time. We know that the long-term loan payback is annual interest payments plus the principal at the end of year 10. And we also know that the short-term loan payback is settled at the end of each year. So at the end of the year, Penn Interest will have to pay back the principal plus interest. Now here's what we do not know. Number 1, how much money should be borrowed now, if any, using the long-term loan option? Number 2, how much money should be borrowed each year, if any, using the short-term loan option? Again, if we take the long-term loan option, that borrowing will be done now. Only at one time. It will be done now. If we use any of the short-term options, we can use those any year we want or any year we don't want. It could be either or both. What will the cash balance be at the end of each year? Again, at the very least, it has to be $500,000. What will be the interest expense at the end of each year. So based on whatever loans are active during any given year, there will have to be some interest paid on those loans. What will that be? What will be the total interest paid over the entire 10-year period with whatever combinations of loans we decide? And finally, what will Penn Interest cash balance be at the end of year 10? So when everything's said and done, the 10-year period has run its course, and we look in the bank account at the end of year 10, what will it be? And of course, our goal is going to be to maximize that cash balance at the end of year 10. So here are our model objectives. What combination of loans will keep the company solvent? That's always good. Meet the minimum requirement of $500,000 cash, at least $500,000 cash. And what combination of loans will result in the highest cash balance at the end of year 10? Now, some people may be thinking at this point, well, it's easy. We'll just take out a huge loan at the beginning, and that'll meet all of our cash needs, and we'll be sitting pretty. There's a problem with that. And that is because this problem is also a roundabout minimization problem. Because remember, every loan Penn Interest takes out and every bit of interest associated with those loans must all be paid back within this 10-year period. So Penn Interest cannot go out and take a $100 million loan in year 1 because it will all have to be paid back with interest by the end of year 10, and there just isn't the projected cash flow to do that by any stretch of the imagination. It's a balance between loan amounts and interest within our given constraint of an annual balance of $500,000. Okay, so let's go ahead and take a very quick look at what this spreadsheet model will look like that we're actually going to construct in the next video. And here it is. So this is actually the spreadsheet model that we will be building in part 2. Some things I will already have built into the spreadsheet. Some of it we will go ahead and actually do step by step with each other. So if you want to go ahead and take a look at this, feel free. But for now, I'm going to go ahead and end this video, and I will see you in part 2.